Pretty much the only one I've ever gotten.
More a matter of control.
It's really cool. Quite awesome.
One of the other key changes with this part 15 is that each county will have to update their solid waste plan. And they haven't, most of them haven't been done for a long time.
Better, you're saying better.
Are there
So how do we turn them
district
off?
requirements? Would be a good time to explain why.
There's guidelines, but
Green
there's
taking my position.
quite a bit of flexibility to allow the locals
You can't just.
to focus on what they want to focus on, as long as
you're muting it.
kind of meeting minimum standard.
Oh, no, she.
Um,
Go for a blow or something.
And does Ingham have an updated?
I don't think so.
You can tell us what
I mean, I'm not sure the last time they did it,
I
but
was looking
almost.
Yeah.
I think the last time counties were required to do it was by the state, was way back in the 90s. Some of them have updated since then, but they will be required to do it if this is enacted.
Well,
because it's like,
Yeah. Well,
Right. Did you hear the Courtney's or Samantha's gonna text me when we're ready and I'll just wait.
yeah, yeah.
So it should be pretty soon.
yeah, that's a good question.
educational.
Back when they had to do it every 5 years, they had people on staff that
Matters.
knew what they needed to do.
Just like Tri-County, or does it have to be by county?
No, it doesn't have to be by county. In fact, they encourage,
Combine.
yeah.
Stormwater.
That microphone is not working, but these should pick you guys up easier.
Yeah, that's what she said.
Okay, she said that. Sorry.
This is fancy.
Yeah.
You're still working at it.
Yes.
Oh, that's totally nuts.
Welcome.
Just a
change of the monotony.
New faculty coming
Oh, yeah. That'll do it.
report out what's
No, it's a change.
going on.
Yeah. Understood it this one, at least it's right.
Kendra's not here tonight, so we might as well have her.
Yeah, no, Steve.
If she can steal the keyboard and mouse, doesn't necessarily drive the entire thing.
I think Roy's got it.
He was cracked. Well.
I don't know if I need that much stress. Apparently we're waiting for
Been some technical difficulties, so she should be, that could be it. We're good to go.
Great. Good evening. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Environmental Commission of the Township of Meridian, December 7th, 2022. Thank you all for your attendance in person, virtual, however it may come. Now is the first time on our agenda for public remarks. Seeing no members of the public, we'll dispense with that item and move to the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Second?
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The agenda is approved. Moving to approval of the minutes of the November 2nd, 2022 meeting. Do I have a motion for approval?
I move.
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the draft minutes as circulated in the packet?
Yes, Mr. Chair, at the end of the paragraph on climate sustainability plan, it appears that the last sentence was cut off. So I'm not sure what was intended there, but Harvey will extend full editing privileges to maybe members of the commission, I don't know.
That seems to be what I recollect. Does that sound like an appropriate amendment to the minutes? Great. Any other glitches? I really like these minutes. I'm a big fan of minutes. In the board and committee updates paragraph, third, fourth sentence, Lafferty reports that the Food to Compost Committee will be meeting with Parks about opportunities, expand the gleaning initiative Okemos schools for about a food audit and environmental curricula. I could not parse that sentence. Expand the gleaning initiative at Okemos schools and talk about a food audit? Is that what we're going for there? Yeah, right in the next paragraph down. Next paragraph down.
Yeah, I'm wondering,
I
go ahead.
think they're meeting with Okemos schools about the gleaning initiative. I don't think, and that there is actually a start of the gleaning initiative at Okemos schools yet.
Okay. So if staff can clean up that sentence, that would be helpful. Any other changes, additions, corrections, superlatives regarding the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor of adopting the minutes as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Moving to new business, master plan, a discussion with Senior Planner Shorkey. I'd like to welcome Senior Planner Shorkey back amongst us. It's always nice to have the Planning Commission here and excited to hear what you got for us about the master plan.
Good evening. Some of you have seen online, some of you have not. Again, I am Brian Shorkey. I've been here a little over a year. I'm the Senior Planner and Community Development. I don't really have a lot for you tonight, just explaining what the master plan is, what we're doing. It's the time for the annual 5-year update, and our staff is going to all the boards and committees and personally discussing it and introducing it. The 5-year update to the master plan was initiated formally by the Planning Commission back in August, and then the Planning Commission October 24th held a public hearing formally kicking off the master plan update. The master plan is not an ordinance document. it is a master plan, comprehensive plan. They're called by there's the same document called by different names. I think we tend to call it a comprehensive plan in Meridian Township. Either way, it's like I said, it's not an ordinance. It's a guiding document. It is supposed to look at what we're doing now, what is the future, what is the trends. One of the most popular features of a comprehensive plan is the future land use map. In my experience, people will look at that in public hearings and go, oh, there's my property, and you say, I'm good. Another section of the goals and another section of the comprehensive plan, though, is the goals and objectives. And that's specifically what I wanted to kind of focus your attention on tonight. Now, unfortunately, it came to my attention today on Leroy's Zoom call that I'd put the wrong goals and objectives in your packet. My memo correctly refers to goal number 2, preserve open space and natural areas. So at this time, I understand there's some copies out there. Does anybody need a copy of this? I have more to hand out. I think you have it available digitally as well.
We have a wealth of digital information.
I know, right? I don't, at this point, we as staff do not have anything that we are proposing. We are completely in a data collection mode. So if you as a body want to discuss goal number 2, preserve open space and natural areas, and the 5 objectives and the assorted strategies that follow that, I'm happy to have that dialogue with you and get your input on that. If you want to address us singularly, go through the whole document, we welcome any and all comments you have. There's a link on the second paragraph on my memo that refers to the feedback form on our township website. And we've gotten a number of comments already submitted to us by residents off the website. Leroy, could you put my memo up on the screen for a second?
For a small fee.
No, those are your minutes. There you go. Yeah, that right there in the second paragraph, meridian.mi.us/about-us/departments/community development, community planning development /master plan. Assorted hyphens in there for people at home who are watching, but you see the link there. You can easily find it from the community development section of the township's website. So with that, that's really all I have. When we have something more substantial to actually show you, I'll be back again for specific input on things like updated goals and objectives, future land use map. I know one thing that we discussed earlier on Leroy's environmental Zoom call, the urban service boundary, things like that. But at this point, we don't have any maps or charts or anything to present to you. And that's why I'm here, just to bring it to your attention and have this dialogue if you are willing and wish to. And otherwise, I'm just directing you toward where you can make input, and hope to hear from you again soon.
Great, thanks. I've got a whole ton, but I'll go around the table. Anybody has any specific issues they'd like to raise with Planner Shorkey?
Got a general type question.
Please.
Can you tell us or remind us what the time frame is for updating the plan?
So we will continue taking input through early next year. We anticipate sometime in the spring bringing like a very rough draft to the Planning Commission. Before we do that, we'll work through goals and objectives. So sometime next year, we'll have a draft plan that we'll present to everybody. And then once that happens, just so you know how this ends, the Planning Commission takes a look at it, then we send it out for review to surrounding communities for 45 days, and then it comes back. Planning Commission then gives it the go-ahead. It goes to the Township Board at that point. This is not, just so you realize, this is not, I know the process that you went through 5 years ago, this is not that. This is not a major overhaul. We don't see this as a major overhaul. We don't think that needs to be overhauled. We just need to, this is the required update. Michigan requires us to do a 5-year update. This is that. And, you know, we're happy to update it as people want to see it, but, you know, it's not that giant overhaul you went through 5 years ago.
Yeah, well,
I'm gonna be here for a minute.
yeah, you are. First, overall, I appreciate falling on your sword about sending us other sections of the plan. I'm happy to see those other sections because they have some really pertinent stuff for this commission in them. But we can start with the goal 2 and maybe work through that a little bit. The goal 2A in the existing plan about adopting policies and programs, the first strategy is about developing and implementing policies regarding open space, land, and natural areas via zoning, et cetera. And I wanted to just bring to your attention for some discussion here that our kind of evolving draft of the water section of our climate sustainability plan starts to raise the question of whether the no net loss of wetlands policy is appropriate going forward, or whether there are opportunities or means to enhance that in the policy sense, so that you could actually see net gain. In my personal view, the policy that we have generally leads to net gain because the compensation for wetland is typically greater than the impact. So the current draft of the sustainability plan is saying, is there more that could be done, and how could it be done?
Okay.
And I've raised in this group and others the notion of looking at how we do stormwater management and what the Drain Commissioner's Office requires of developers in terms of managing stormwater to lead to enhanced stormwater management facilities that go beyond stopping flooding, but actually provide other ecological services such as filtration or evaporation or other things that we'd like to see. At the Planning Commission level, we've had some success with applicants in encouraging them to go beyond the minimal planting of a stormwater retention or detention facility to increase the biodiversity, to increase evaporation, to increase filtration and things. So that's one part where we might want to work with that particular strategy in the revision of the master plan. Further on in that section, strategy 6 was develop a tree preservation ordinance to protect significant mature trees. And I know that's a topic that's been before the Environmental Commission before my time and did not result in a policy. And I'm wondering if after 5 years of this master plan, is that still something that we want to have as a strategy we're trying to achieve if we're not really making forward progress on it? If we do want to make progress on it, how would we do that? What would it look like? Controlling what private property owners do with trees on their own land is really tough. But the board has had success in convincing the road department to incorporate significant trees in their road improvement projects. So that's one of those areas where, and I know there was discussion about the potential for increasing tree cover along some of the county roads. So whether we want to keep that as a strategy or not is worth thinking about a bit. The others, B and C, I think are things that we are currently working on. Conserving wetlands, floodplains, other water retention, open spaces and natural areas. I just wanted to flag those for the commission as issues that we've kind of grappled with in the past and we might want to pay special attention to.
Just a quick aside on your tree preservation ordinance question. I actually wrote one in a brief part of my past history as a consultancy for a town in South Carolina. They're more technical than you think they are. They're difficult to come up with. But if this commission chooses to want to leave that in there, it's worth a discussion. It is not a substitute for a landscape ordinance, which we are in the beginning stages of looking at updating in our department. Just so you know, just a little bit of information.
Is it possible that that landscaping ordinance would talk about the preservation of significant trees as part of a site plan evaluation?
What we have now, I think you know this, so what we have now is significant, like trees that are being preserved are tagged on a site. What you're talking about is an ordinance that would mandate which trees are preserved. Do that as some part of a landscape ordinance is something we could look at.
Okay.
The question of what is a significant tree is also a somewhat subjective question depending on your community too. So we haven't even talked about that.
Right, right.
If I might interject on that as
Sure.
well, and my memory doesn't serve me extremely well in this case, but as I recall, when I was working for the Michigan Townships Association, Canton, Charter Township and Wayne County had a tree ordinance that was challenged in court, and they lost that fight. So there may be some legal obstacles for the township to pursue that going forward as well.
I'll note that. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other thoughts on that before we turn to the errant but still very relevant section 7 of the?
Well, I guess I just wanted to ask, what, are there models of places where tree ordinances have been written success and made a significant difference? The trouble is, of course, presence or absence of a thing, it's always hard to, ask what would have happened if the opposite had been true. But I'm just curious about.
If we get to the point where we are writing such an ordinance, I'd research what communities have that. I did mention that I wrote one. I have no idea if they even adopted it. But we would look into that. I don't know off the top of my head any that have one in place right now, but I could get that information.
Yeah.
Okay, the other section that was included in our packet was goal number 7, which was promote efficient and sustainable growth practices. And a whole bunch of those are about energy efficiency, electric charging stations, LEED, redevelopment, green space, and other things. And I was wanting to flag that for our energy team and make sure that the goals, the strategies within that existing master plan are still appropriate and relevant as we move forward. And I know that we also have on our agenda this evening, or at least in our packet, additional materials was township goals, which were set by the board earlier this week. Last week, at its last meeting, and distributed by Manager Walsh earlier, that pretty much task us with developing a policy around EV charging stations. Did I read it correctly? The goal, the township goal? Would you like to speak to that, Trustee Jasinski?
Not sure I have all the info. Sorry, Chair.
Yeah, like I say, we have this wealth of digital information at our fingertips. And of course, the piece that I was looking for isn't falling to my fingertips either, but
I can look for it.
see if I put it here. Roy, do you by any chance have that last piece that was added to the packet that I'm not?
For number 7? Goal number 7?
No, it was, well, let me see.
The township goals for
Yes.
2023?
That's right.
It wasn't added to our packet.
maybe it was just added in my mind. Maybe it was a virtual adding in my own little brain.
No, but I did see a copy of it. I can go fetch it. But is there,
I think I have it.
is it on the internet? Or on the Meridian Township page or?
I don't think so, we just adopted.
So I guess, John, I was asking you, when you look at the strategies on Goal 7A, or do those all seem still relevant and germane, or do they need some updating?
Well, I took a quick look at them earlier today, and they did seem still relevant. So that was my initial impression. I think, though, that it would be, like you suggested, a good idea to have the energy team discuss it at our next meeting.
Okay, that's good. All right. Any other comments, questions for Planner Shorkey on the master plan update process? Go ahead, Courtney.
Chair McConnell, I found it, so it's our goal, letter E, within our environmental sustainability. Support the Environmental Commission to develop a plan for the township to construct and install first electronic vehicle charging station.
So it's talking about township-owned properties, or are we talking about?
We'll talk to
Okay.
assistant manager if you want more.
I didn't mean to call you out.
He has everything up here.
Could you, Trustee Wazinski, could you first clarify which document you're referencing?
The township goals for 2023.
2023, that's what I thought. Yep, so we've already looked at the electrical panels for this building and for the public safety building or the police building, if you're unfamiliar with our terminology. We do not have enough service on our panels today to accommodate very many EV chargers. So we know that we have to bring in a new service from the right-of-way on Marsh Road. So what we're going to do is plan in 2023 and come up with an actual plan for the first installation of the chargers. Where do we want it to go? We're going to have to bore a lot of underground conduit. So we want to make sure we think through the logistics on this and where we want the conduit stubbed off, where we could build off in the future, that kind of thing. So we're going to plan it in 2023, and depending on how long that planning takes, we may or may not look at it at doing the RFP even next year, with construction probably in the spring of 2024.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay.
But
So yeah, develop a plan for the township to construct and install its first vehicle electric charging station. So there was the one before that was with the support of the Environmental Commission, develop a plan for the township to achieve its goal of 100% renewable energy by 2035. The reports I've seen suggest that the township is currently on track to meet that goal, and that there's a pretty good plan in place, including what we were just talking about. So that sounds like a great thing to be tasked with doing, since it's already on the path to getting done. And then another was to work with the Environmental Commission to continue educating the community on the importance of protecting our wetlands, natural resources, and the township's wetland protection ordinance. Again, something we're working on and oversee and administer the 2023 Green Grants Initiative. We are going to be so good at meeting all of the goals assigned to us by the township board because they're already going. Anything else on master plan?
Thanks for your time. Once again, you know where I live. You have the link. If anything comes to you, just submit it digitally. We all see it. I've been saving them, and we'll look at them all at once and see what trends we come up with. When we have something actual to present to you, I'll be back again. Thanks.
Thank you.
Dan's here if
Yeah,
you'd
please.
like a brief update.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm told everyone would like an update on the very disruptive construction projects throughout the township. So I'll start with Okemos and Grand River, the intersection. And think of the Grand River project, at least in terms of this year. There's the milling and resurfacing from the Marsh Road intersection east. That has been completed for some time now. So no more orange barrels east of Marsh Road. And then the other two things that you need to think about is the intersection at Okemos Road and then the Nakoma section, or the section in front of Playmakers. Both of those sections are being raised a little over 2 feet to alleviate the flooding We did the offsetting cut, if you recall, behind the central fire station. Even if you drive back there on just the service drive around the back, you can actually see a huge mound from where the offsetting cut was made behind there. Okemos and the Okemos Road and Grand River intersection will probably be, tomorrow, it will be reopened in terms of the 5 lanes on Grand River in both directions. So 2 through lanes, east and westbound, center left turn lane, all fully reopened. If you leave here right now and you are traveling eastbound, you do have 2 through lanes, eastbound, center turn lane through the intersection. So effectively, everything east, the only thing that will be under construction at that point will be the Nakoma section. However, the signal won't be turned on until probably Wednesday or Thursday of next week. Then the turn movement onto Okemos Road, north and southbound at the intersection will resume. Again, Wednesday or Thursday of next week. We were hoping that would be a little bit sooner, but we just had a water main break down at Hamilton and Okemos. And so we don't want to send a bunch of traffic that way while we have concrete curing down there and some lane closures due to that. Then the Nakoma section is being finished up, so that's the Playmaker section. All the concrete is in. At this point, they're mostly doing pavement markings, saw cuts, things of that nature. We hope that that will reopen end of next week to the middle of the following week. So sometime next Friday to the following Wednesday. Okemos Road Bridge will be the last project completed, and we're looking roughly at end of, I would say, first week of January to the last week of January right now. They're getting everything in on the beams. We don't have a date yet on when they will pour the bridge deck for the other 3 lanes. The bridge was scheduled to be completed at the end of November. It's now looking like the end of January, so it appears that they're about 8 weeks behind. I will give the contractor credit. They're about 4 weeks behind at the very outset of the project. It started February 14th. They were not able to actually start construction until March 14th. They lost a month due to AT&T relocating fiber and their cables on the old southbound bridge. So at the very outset, they were basically pushed to the end of December. They're running about 2 to 4 weeks behind at this point, which overall isn't terrible given the nature of the project. Happy to answer any and all questions.
My understanding, one of my favorite benefits of the project is the pedestrian crossings, and my understanding is they've got the curb cuts done for those at the 3 locations, and that the installation of the refuge islands will come as part of the next phase in 2023?
Correct. That all 3 islands will go in, and that's Washington Heights, so kind of down by the auto dealerships and Home Depot, and then traveling to the west, right in front of McDonald's, where that bus stop is. Obviously, that's the most traffic crossing. And then Campus Hill Apartments and Campus Hill Drive, just before the CN Railroad Bridge, which gets a lot of student foot traffic mid-block there.
So those will be flashers or actual traffic lights?
They will be a refuge island. It'll be pretty much identical to the island that is by Grand Traverse Pie Company, just west of Hagedorn on Grand River.
Okay.
So raised curb island for refuge, pedestrian signage on the island and on just out the outside lanes of traffic. So good signage. I also asked them to put some reflective overlays on the posts just to increase motorist visibility of those islands as much as possible. We could look at RRFBs in the future. I'm not certain if that was a conversation that was had prior to my coming on to staff or not. So, but we could look at putting the flashing beacons in the future. That would be a conversation that we'd have to get approval through MDOT. But.
Yeah, I've crossed a lot of times at that Campus Hill, people are coming down that hill at 50 miles an hour, so telling them to slow down for a crosswalk seems like it's without actual control.
I think that was a conversation that was had where
Exercise.
It's a delicate balance because sometimes with the flashing beacons, you give the pedestrian a little too much comfort.
Right.
In a setting where it may not be realistic.
Right.
we had some MSU students that thought the flashing beacons on Hagedorn that we installed would stop traffic. We had some custom signs made and installed on that RRFB to make sure that they know that oncoming traffic doesn't stop.
It's a suggestion.
Yeah, I think a car found that one of those beacons itself didn't stop traffic. Is that right?
Yeah, cars cause a lot of damage that we may or may not catch on to. Motorists on Marsh Road caused quite a bit of damage today as well.
Oh, dear.
While we're on the Park Lake Campus Hill intersection story, can you give us an update on, we've heard, got a little update from Giannis about the compensating cut that's going to kind of coming down the road for the interurban, but there's a fair amount of confusion about how the MSU Lake Lansing Trail will act once it gets to Park Lake Road. So if you could help us clear up what the current plan for making that.
To make sure that I'm speaking intelligibly, I could bump upstairs real quick and grab my plans and just reference. I believe the crossing, I can't remember if it aligns perfectly with Park Lake and Grand River or not. So if you'd like, I can run upstairs real quick and double check my plans and get you the precise answer.
I don't want you to run. We can sing a song.
Figure of speech. You could go on to your next agenda item and I could come back on that one.
All right. Yeah, I think I would certainly appreciate knowing what the current plan there is, so if it's possible.
Dan, would it help if we just brought it up? Or do you need to?
I don't have it online, and the computer here is not tied into our G drive yet, is the trouble.
Oh, it's not? Oh, okay,
Yeah.
never mind.
So,
We have it in last month's packet. I could probably pull it
the
up.
full engineering plans?
No, not the full engine.
Okay, yeah. The map of the total path is not really to scale or to that specific detail, so I can run upstairs, but any other questions on the other construction projects going on?
Yeah, I guess I've got a brief on, you spoke of the islands that are going in next year. Just curious as to why they weren't put in this year when most of the other work was being done?
They could have done the one by Washington Heights, and I'm not 100% why they didn't do that one. The others, it mostly had to do with the traffic control because they're shifting traffic. And so to put the refuge island, it made it very difficult. Like, for instance, if you look in front of McDonald's where that one refuge island will go in, traffic has been moving diagonally, shifting right there. So it would highly complicate. And that actually is a good point that I should have mentioned previously because I try to always mention this. We will be starting to communicate this at the conclusion of the bridge project once we get through the 2022 construction, but there still will be some remaining work on Grand River in 2023. The bridge will be done in totality, but the sections from the Marsh Road intersection, including the intersection itself, to the CN Railroad Bridge just before Park Lake, the sections that were not raised and did not have new concrete placed on those raised sections will have to be milled and resurfaced in 2023. It's a logistics problem with the construction because when you bring all that fill in, do you really want to put a new road in and then bring all that fill and all those materials in on that new road to that portion where we were raising it? So it's a logistics challenge. So, but milling and resurfacing goes like clockwork relative to what we've been dealing with this year. So if we have any lag time between contractors, because all the contractors in this space do specialize, we'll work with MDOT to get the barrels out of the road in the interim and open the road back up if we have some of those. We had some of those instances with Marsh Road, or the construction and resurfacing east of Marsh Road this year. And after the first one, we worked with MDOT to make sure they were reopening those lanes periodically. That's why we had it reopened. And then we had the outer lanes closed at the very end of the project to finish raising the manholes. The manholes are all in the outer lanes. But we didn't want those barrels left there for 3 weeks in the interim until that contractor came back.
Thanks.
I'll throw two more at you. The temporary service drive on north side of Grand River, east of Okemos Road, will revert to sidewalk once the roadway is done?
So that temporary service drive along McDonald's, Panera, the strip mall at the hard corner, that will actually start to come out here in the coming weeks. Once they reopen that intersection fully, at some point after that, they'll do a temporary lane closure periodically on that outer north lane along those stores and take the asphalt out and raise it up and then pour the concrete. That'll actually occur this year.
Great. And the other one is the underpass under the Okemos Road Bridge. Clearly, they've laid the riprap and the grade for that. What surface will go there?
It'll be concrete underneath it, and then we will tie it back in on both sides. So on the Wanch Park side or the west side of Okemos Road, the tie-in is fairly simple. There's not really any grade issues. So we're already working on plans for that. It's a little bit more difficult on the east side because, let me see here. Could I pull up a map real quick? Sure.
Now we're going to test the real-time technical prowess here. This is brave.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it, there's going to be a pathway between Wanch and Ferguson Park, so you can get underneath without going over the roadway. Really? Something that we were hoping for a long time.
Orientation. All right. Thankfully, Google updated their aerial imagery, so this was earlier in the construction project when the new bridge had not yet started, but the new bridge is spanning right here. And so what Chair McConnell is referencing, on this side, there's going to be a pathway underneath the new bridge. And so we're going to tie into, I believe, this parking lot here, so we're going to have a little connection here because they're going to stop somewhere under the pedestrian bridge here with their section, and then we're going to tie it back in next year on our asphalt contract probably. So it'll be concrete under here, but we'll probably tie in with asphalt because there's a grade here. This side is the difficult side because you got to think about it. Wanch Park is on the north side of the river. Ferguson is on the south side. So how do you make that connection?
There's a little bit on the north side.
Yep. So you come, you're in Wanch Park, you're hanging out, you want to go to Ferguson, you come under here, but you find yourself and you're on the north side of the river. So how do you get over? The new bridge will have a pedestrian facility on the east side. And so the pathway under the bridge will end somewhere about here. We have to see how the final grade works out here, but we're going to do some kind of ramp and or stairs that are ADA compliant that will take you up to the pathway. Depending on the grade will depend on where we can tie into the pathway. Can we tie in here, or is it going to be a little bit further to the north? So we have to see how that final grade actually shakes out. Then you would take the new bridge over, and then it'll actually tie in seamlessly here once the bridge is complete, because they have to reorient this whole service drive. So that'll all be completed. This connection point will be completed. We just are going to have to piece in this little section next year and this little section.
Super. That also, by the way, provides the same function for wildlife. The hope is that once that pathway is completed, that more wildlife will choose to go under the bridge than over the bridge. And that's something that's in the green space plan, is those fragile wildlife corridors. So.
And the abutments are wider on this, so we did alert FEMA. FEMA's updating their floodplains, and some of that data can have an impact, and this was one of the changes that we noted for them in terms of flood risk.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask who owns the land to the east on the north side of the river? Because
it's part of the park.
Yeah, that is still part of the park?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Up until that house.
Up until that house, yeah.
Okay.
So it is disjointed, but it is part of parcel 21453005.
I see.
And many people do cross the river on foot at low water, but so you do have a second option rather than going all the way up and around. So.
I was thinking you were going to start a ferry service.
No, I wanted to reinstall the chase for the old mill that was originally sited there and capture that hydropower for something.
More energy,
Yeah,
energy for the township.
Car charging.
there you go. Any other questions for Assistant Manager Lobsommer? Thanks so much for joining us. If you want to run up upstairs and do that, that's fine. Otherwise, you can get it to us some other time. It's not crucial that it happen.
I can get you an answer.
All right.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, moving along then on our, so all the technology in the world and decides just to stop working. Yeah, okay, good. Luckily, staff has prepared this handy analog version of the universe. If there's nothing else on master plan memo or update from staff, we got old business climate sustainability plan edits and next steps. I think it's been since we last met that the joint township board and commission meeting was held. And at that meeting, I sounded out the township board on the idea of maybe sending them a well-developed portion of the current draft of the climate sustainability plan to make sure that we're kind of on the right track in terms of our level of ambition, the format, the level of detail and things. And they seem fairly receptive to that. So my intention at this point, unless somebody would like to do something different, is basically to draft a memo and see if we can get maybe our board liaison to see if there's an appropriate time for that to make it to the township board agenda.
Sure.
I don't expect them to engage in a great level of debate or detail about it, but it would be good, I think, to have their feedback on that, especially the energy section, to make sure that we're giving them the sort of document and the sort of format that they think is going to be useful and interesting. And if, as we get the green light on that, we can move forward with other sections. That seemed like an appropriate way to go forward. Yes, sir.
I seem to remember seeing that those sections were sent to the Transportation Commission and other staff. That did happen, didn't it, recently?
I don't know that I've seen that on the Transportation Commission's agenda yet. But they don't meet as regularly even as we do. So I'd hate to put off going to the township board too long before we at least do that, but if there's an opportunity for it to get through the Transportation Commission before it goes forward to the board, that would be preferable.
Well, they do meet tomorrow night, that's a little quick. They meet again, though, January. So if you have something you want me to put on their agenda, I can get it there.
But their packet went out last week?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
would you describe it as a jam-packed agenda or a agenda light?
if there's something you want me to bring to them, I can do that. But I will have to coordinate with Leroy to find out what I'm talking about, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. At some point.
But yeah, I'm happy to do that.
All right.
Happy to do that.
And that's, they typically meet at the fire station, or are they moving over here now?
They moved over here.
Okay. Tomorrow evening.
Yes.
I will put that on my agenda
6 o'clock.
and I'll see if I can get their ear for a few minutes.
Shoot me an email tomorrow. Tell me how you want it to read. I'll let Mr. Vagnazzi know that I'm going to ask for an amendment to the agenda.
Sounds good?
Okay.
Yeah. Basically, we'll just cite certain bullet points in our current draft that relate to transportation, it's EV charging mainly, and some other things.
Okay.
But now that we're saying that, sorry to do this to you, but I had myself a note that I skipped over when we were talking about the master plan, and goal number 7 included a strategy explore methods, this was strategy number 7 of goal number 7. Explore methods through ordinances or by providing incentives for existing businesses to upgrade their parking lots and landscaping to increase tree cover and shade, to be energy efficient and environmentally friendly. And I had flagged to mention that Planning Director Schmidt has mentioned a couple of times in public that the Planning Department is looking at our parking ordinances to see if we're encouraging more parking than we would like to see. There has been a tradition in this country in the 20th century to mandate minimum parking to make sure that, I think, a new business didn't assume they were going to be able to use an existing business's parking and then cause problems. And what we've found across the country is that we end up with a lot more parking than we're ever using, and that shared parking tends to be a better model, especially when you have businesses whose daily rhythms are different. So I believe that's something that the Planning Department is looking at in terms of an ordinance revision to bring to the Planning Commission.
Nowhere near time for us to bring a draft to the Planning Commission to even discuss it, but yeah, we have started looking at that. That also ties into your, as long as we were talking about, circling back, that also ties into your EV station discussion too. Some communities are starting to mandate at a certain level of parking, 1 or 2 EV stations. Should we be looking at that? We're just beginning to discuss that. We're nowhere near making a recommendation, but when we do, yes, we'll bring that to transportation for sure.
I believe that's what happened with our bicycle parking ordinance. We basically took our car parking ordinance and said, well, if you've got that many car parking spaces required per whatever the criterion was, you should also have this proportion of bike parking. And so then using that same model to encourage or require EV parking makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, well, looking at that anyway.
All right. Anything else on climate sustainability, plan, edits, procedures? Please go ahead.
I think most of you probably noticed that I put a Google Doc up that's editable. So if you want to edit your sections, you can do that right online. There is also the full document that you can comment on, and that's so let's see here.
You linked it in your email. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it was in the email. So if you have any questions, let me know. But we talked about an organic document that we could sort of a living document, and it was sort of an attempt to combine our editing tasks with also an example of a living document. So that's it.
All right, well, I think that brings us to the end of our agenda for this evening, unless there's something that other business someone would like to raise. Or we can move to reports and announcements. Are there any board announcement, thoughts, things going on at the board that you'd like to share? Or any other board liaison, brownfield redevelopment, green team?
Yeah, real briefly, the green team does have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. We will continue to work on our plans for 23. But on the short term, we do have a coat drive scheduled for this coming Saturday at the farmers market from 10 to 2 o'clock on that day. So encourage anyone to bring gently used coats and other winter supplies to us on Saturday. Thanks.
Energy?
Yeah, I have a couple items. We just recently got some final data from our last Solarize meeting, and we had 6 meetings this past year, and let's see, we had 112 attendees total and ended up with 19 purchases so far, which is 153 kilowatts. And the energy team has been talking about doing a similar effort next year and probably having 3 to 5 meetings. So that's, we've kind of finished collecting data for this past year's program, and are actively planning a program for next year. The other thing I'll mention is that Leroy and I were approached by public sector consultants. They're preparing a grant application to the Michigan Public Service Commission. This is a grant solicitation that is titled Low Carbon Infrastructure. And public sector consultants has been talking to me and the city of Lansing, the city of East Lansing, about having an application for a planning grant for community solar planning. And what this would entail is there'd be no transfer of money between the township and the either direction. They're not expecting any match money from us, and they wouldn't be providing any dollars to us. Our participation would be to help in the planning. And the planning in this context, because community solar can mean many different things to different people, think in terms of the community solar project at Bircham Park, except think in terms of it at a municipal facility. And a good example might be the water treatment plant, because they use a lot of power. And so the idea with this planning grant is to kind of look at all the different issues, opportunities, maybe actually come up with some potential projects that later an application could be sent into the Public Service Commission for some dollars for the actual project. The concept too includes the idea that, well, I'll just use the water treatment plant as an example. You have a solar array there and the power goes to the water treatment plant. Our residents can participate, buy or lease a panel. And then what happens is one has to work out some creative ways to get a financial benefit to the subscriber or the participant in the community solar project. Now, in that context, one could have a credit on a water bill, for example, or one could have some sort of Meridian Township money that you could use to pay bills or go to the farmer's market. So, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head, you know, but that's the whole purpose of this planning grant, and to work with East Lansing and Lansing to kind of think through some of these issues and what the barriers are. And kind of, it would start up in the spring, probably last about 9-10 months. If the Environmental Commission thinks we should pursue this, the next step would be for me to work with Leroy to get a letter of commitment that would need to go in with the grant application. And I actually have the public sector consultants provided me a template, which I can provide to Leroy tomorrow. Because for something like this, I'm not sure, maybe, Bill, you should sign it, maybe the township manager should sign it, maybe the supervisor should. I'll let Leroy figure that out, and working with, and then I'm not sure if this rises to the sort of thing that you want to mention to the township board, because it's very speculative. You know, grant application might go in, and there's going to be a lot of competition for those dollars, so.
I think the board has to approve grant applications. So they'll have a chance to see it regardless. And I would have thought, in terms of a letter of commitment, if there's a matching requirement.
There is no matching requirement.
Okay.
Yeah.
If it,
And we would not be the grant applicant.
right.
Just to be clear, we're basically a participant in the planning.
Gotcha.
And so the public sector consultants would be the applicant, and then the three communities, maybe more, would be participants.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I think it would be helpful to know I mean, you mentioned we would be a part of the planning, but what exactly does that mean? What's the time commitment, or, more details about what that would actually look like?
Yeah, and what we can do is this template commitment letter briefly outlines what our commitment is, which includes monthly meetings, and Leroy and I would be committed to doing that. But there's other, kind of what you'd expect to have in this sort of planning process, would be responsible for maybe providing some data into the process, would be responsible for identifying people in the township who maybe should be involved in the discussions, things like that. Yeah. But Leroy, you may want to share the draft commitment letter with the whole Environmental Commission, because that kind of briefly describes what you just mentioned.
No, I don't yet.
Yeah, it's that tricky issue of staff time, so that would have to
Right.
come from the people who make those decisions.
Right.
As much as we would love to control Leroy's life.
Speak for yourself.
Yes. So anything on food or food to compost?
Yes, well, I've been attending the Michigan Good Food Charter Council meetings, and we've been discussing, as I've spoken about before, that's a good food charter for the state of Michigan. The folks that are attending that meeting are folks that are working in areas of food all over the state. So most of the discussions at this point have been about the structure of the charter council and how to better coordinate the work, that's happening across the state that has to do with food issues, including one of their focus areas is environmental sustainability. So not a ton to report there, just that I am a part of those discussions so that we can, identify and ways to coordinate and continue forward. And certainly a lot of what is in our plan is also in coordination with what's in the state plan or what's in our draft of the food section of the plan. I was not able to attend the food to composting meeting. I know I do have Val's notes here, but I know some other folks were there. If it would be better for someone else to provide that update. Or I can go for the notes here. Okay. So there are still, we, as you know, we're gleaning at the farmers market last season, and the plan is to start again in May. There are plans for some changes. I won't go into, all of those. It's just, we'll still be gleaning. It's just kind of the details of kind of that process. There have been some discussions with grocery stores, about starting gleaning there. Some of it is not entirely possible, but I think there had been some success potentially with Aldi's. Was that?
I think that didn't happen since the meeting. There was some follow-up on that.
Okay.
At least the local Aldi's did not appear to be an option.
Okay.
But I know the Aldi's in Lansing has been working on that, so helping out.
Okay. Okay, and then there's a note here that may be better for Bill about MSU continuing to work through reusing containers for food to eliminate wasteful packaging.
That's all true. That's all true. The newest and latest on that, just for those who are interested, when MSU faced the pandemic, there was a huge shift in their dining services to mainly almost exclusively takeout meals and an awful lot of disposables. And the university has been weaning itself from those ever since. And this week, because I eat a lot of meals at MSU dining halls, I'm happy to report I'm using washable plates and washable silverware again, and it is both more satisfying and a whole lot easier to eat food. So that's a great thing. Just to tack on one additional bit on the food composting, I did have a conversation, again, it turns out that Public Sector Consultants is implementing a project, an Eagle project with Lansing and East Lansing on a regional organics audit. And after a long time of trying to get that, all the I's dotted and T's crossed, they're actually operational and out contacting both the municipalities as well as some of the private contractors, some of the bigger businesses to generate a two-county picture of the opportunities for increasing capture of organics in diverting from the landfill. So that project is underway.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe I just wanted to make a correction in my earlier remarks. I believe I indicated the coat drive was this coming Saturday. It's actually a week from Saturday, the 17th, so I don't want to misinform the public. So don't show up this Saturday, but show up a week from Saturday. Thanks.
Anything else? Yeah, please, go ahead.
We've been busy. It's the end of the year, right?
Yeah.
So I just speak a little bit, I'll try to keep it brief, a little bit to the 2023 goals. We spoke a bit about the EV stations, but we're also looking to apply for an Eagle grant for a new recycling center behind the service center. The Eagle grant, if granted, would take up about 80% of the cost for that. And we don't expect any change at the existing recycling center. So it would be in addition to, and maybe some additional services there. There was the continued goal of the 100% renewable energy within township buildings by 2035. And then continued education wetland efforts. So that was the main goals. I was going to say we've got one of three. So we have three top goals. So we have 10 big goals. Going to be tough to achieve all of them, but we're going to work really hard. Top three goals will include the phase 3 of MSU to Lake Lansing Trail connection. So about 75% of that's coming from Ingham County's Parks and Trail millage, 13% is coming from Meridian Township's pathway, and then the remainder would come from that Michigan Natural Resource Trust Fund grant. With regards to budget, we've got quite a few things within the Parks and Rec budget, but some of the notable is Central Park Pavilion updates, the grant proposal for the pathway, historical village improvements, which are needed and necessary, and the Harris Nature Center's facade improvement. There's also $10,000 appropriated to the Lake Lansing cleanup and nearly $1 million appropriated to the stormwater project that will assess regional planning and implementation of federal mandates. And of course, our green grants. A couple others that are not necessarily exactly environmental commission, but social justice. We added to our, we continued our DEI efforts within our goals, but we also we discussed appropriation for funds within our leftover ARPA funds to work on that. And what we're hoping to do this year, we've had a lot of conversations, we've done some trainings. We really want to be public facing and adopt some community events. And two of the things that we're looking at is LGBTQI Pride celebration this year. So that'll be fantastic. These are all just ideas. We don't have any specifics yet. And then also a cultural celebration. So looking at the diversity within our community already and bringing that to the rest of the community so people can experience what our different cultures are here. Another thing that we added to our ARPA funds appropriations is affordable housing. So maybe, again, we have to think about this a little bit further, but the idea is providing either grants to help developments or even providing grants that will help individual residents that may need help to stay, neighborhood stabilization, but give them some funds to be able to pay for those upgrades as the aging population and/or any other ADA compliance. Other than that, I think that's pretty much it. There was discussion, or it was adopted to disposal of, if you see all your new home TV equipment here, but looking at disposal of home TV in addition to selling, but recycling of that old equipment. So I think that's pretty much it. And I've been taking notes on everything else that we need to ask the board about.
I think on the DEI issue, something I've asked, I think out loud in the past, but I don't remember hearing whether any progress has been made. Has that group given any thought to exploring the idea of a land acknowledgement as part of the township's policies?
No, could you explain more, Chair?
Many institutions, including Michigan State University, have adopted relatively formal language acknowledging the ancestral rights of the land that the university sits on. It's a particular case for a land-grant university who was ceded that land by a federal government who had acquired that land from others. And I don't know enough about it to be knowledgeable, but it seems like something that's worth giving some thought to. I happened to get involved in watching documentaries about the War of 1812 and Tecumseh, and reading that Okemos was part of that conflict, and it seems like something worth at least thinking about including in our township policies.
Yeah, absolutely. It's still a relatively new work group, so we are always looking for input and/or ideas. So thank you.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question that comes back to the housing issues that you were mentioning? One of the things that's slowly penetrating my consciousness is that people who have relatively large amounts of money are doing things like purchasing houses and making them into, VRBO or temporary rental housing, which effectively takes them off the market for residents or future residents who would like to get started. And a lot of the new housing that's built in the township is sort of in the high price category. I was wondering, to what extent can the township modulate any of those activities? Because I worry that we're not as friendly as we'd like to be to young families who want to start owning a home, and can't even afford it because it's $250,000 just to get started.
Mr. Chair,
Please go ahead.
Thank you.
I was going to call on you.
No idea what the rules.
I forgot you were here.
So, over the course of the year, the planning department has been researching affordable housing as it applies specifically to Meridian Township. And I'm not going to lie to you, I've been doing this over 20 years, and I was astounded at what we found. The Planning Commission at its next meeting, as part of our ongoing master plan dialogue, we're actually bringing our white paper on the affordable housing issue that we've created to the Planning Commission for discussion next week. As we move toward the master plan, we don't have anything that we're proposing at this point, but we anticipate having some suggestions on addressing those, anything that you've got. Now, I don't think we can control who purchases a home. That's, and as a former real estate agent, I don't think I would want you to. But, there are other issues, the cost of construction, Ms. Wazinski referred to it earlier, the possibility of loans, grants, for homeowners. Everything is on the table, other than, I can't, tell a conglomerate, don't buy that house.
So when you say you were astounded, that implies that what you saw was different from your expectations. So what were your
It
expectations?
exceeded my expectations.
In a positive sense.
I had a sense, this is the unverified personal gnosis of me, okay? I moved to this area 7 years ago, and when I came here, I was a single father, and I knew I wanted my kid in Okemos schools, and I searched for an apartment. And so over the 6 or 7 years I've been here, I've seen how the apartment rate has gone up and up and up and up, specific to one or two, the apartment complex I've been in. And then I ended up in a townhouse when I got remarried, and then I saw how that went up and up and up and up. And part of the report that we're going to be presenting to the Planning Commission next week, we have an intern who did a really, really fantastic job at this. We called. I had him call a bunch of different. He suggested. That's more appropriate. He came up with the idea. Joey, he did a really good job with this. He called up like a select group, like 10 to 15. I forget the exact number of apartment complexes in the township, and asked, how many 1-bedroom, 1-bath apartments do you have, and what do you rent them for? And then from that created a weighted average of the average cost of a 1-bedroom, 1-bath in an apartment complex in Meridian Township right now, and what you come up with is $1,091 for a 1-bed, 1-bath apartment. That's the kind of number that I'm talking about made me go, oh, wow. I expected it to be a significant number. I did not expect it to be a mortgage payment. Anyway, but we are addressing it. I didn't mean to hijack your meeting, but we do hear what you're saying, and the Planning Commission will be discussing it. And as we move forward with the master plan, we're going to hopefully have some suggestions.
While you're up there, could you say 2 sentences about the Grand Reserve model of housing?
Sure. So DTN is a company that is in the leasing business, and they just got a special use permit approval for a project called Grand Reserve. This went through the rezoning process a couple years ago. From RA to RC, a multifamily designation, but it was a special use permit because they did a combination of duplexes and single family houses. The model that they're using, that Chair McConnell just referenced, was they're not selling the houses. The houses are rentals. They're a rental company. Therefore, they're also not separate parcels. It's one big community. So no one's going to be responsible for their own lawn maintenance or anything like that. The idea is that, and I think the data supports this, there's this sector. It's easy to think about the poor college students, and I get that. I've been there, and that's true. And senior housing, I've through my wife and her father, I've seen that. But there's this middle professional that is making good money. They're starting a family, maybe. They need a good place to live. They're more than an apartment. They need a house. But you just mentioned, boy, there aren't a lot of houses. We are in a historic low inventory period and have been for a few years. So DTN's model gives them an opportunity, a college professor, a doctor, something like that, medical field, come in, rent the house. Now they're in that house. And from my own personal experience, when I got remarried, I needed a place for 4 kids. 4 people, 2 kids. 4 people. I had to move out of my apartment. I had to move up. I moved into a townhouse. And that worked for our situation at that time. This is a step above that then. So We'll see how it works. But they've used this model in other communities and have near 100% occupancy rates.
But it's still a rental model as opposed to, developing your own equity.
That is correct.
Yeah.
That is absolutely correct.
They call it oftentimes renter by choice. So if I'm a junior faculty or visiting faculty and I want to have a nice place to live, but I know I'm not going to be here long enough to actually build any equity, and I don't have to have a down payment, I don't have to have all that this insurance, I don't have to go through that hassle. I just rent the sort of house that I'd like to live in and maybe sock the equity away some other way.
They have four models, four different designs available, and one of our conditions of approval is they can't stack them together. They can't put like all the, ugly one, not ugly, that's not the word I want to use, but all the aluminum siding together, so to speak. And then they're putting trails in. There are 4 protected wetlands on the property. They're all protected. There are 40-foot buffers around. One exception, they have a road going through a buffer, and they're asking for a variance for that road, but that's in the buffer of the wetland, not the wetland itself. So 64% of the property ends up permanently preserved open space. So it's kind of and as long as we're on this, because I had 1 or 2 heated discussions about this, they were approved for 220 units and they only came forward with 115 total. So, anyway, does that answer your questions?
It does, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What it tells me is that the housing developer industry is looking to diversify what it is that it's building and how it's offering those to the community. And I personally think that kind of experimentation is really important and look forward to it. But it is an active topic of discussion at the Planning Commission. So that takes us to the end of our agenda with the exception of one last tidbit of information. I'm making our poor Director of Public Works running up and down the stairs in the middle of the night.
Well, before Dan finishes, I just wanted to say Brownfield did meet, and it's not very interesting. All that they did was basically confirm the separation between the Pine Village project and the now they're calling it American House project, right? Hazlitt Village, sorry, Pine Village. Anyway, what was the L&L there? That whole section is now going to be handled as a separate process from the American House, which is the project that's becoming the retirement home. So it was just to separate those projects. So that's basically all we did.
What do you got for us?
Just can't help myself. I got to weigh in on the housing conversation real quick. I can't help myself. I mean, it's a tricky thing, and because one person's equity, to Commissioner Jackson's point, is another person's purchase price. That equity is something that you will then sell to someone else. So your success in equity becomes someone else's financial burden, so to speak. But fundamentally, our school district's success is what drives the home values. There are some pretty toned down homes in like Copper Creek. There's 3-bed, 2-bath, 3-bed, 1.5 bath. There's some boomer downsizing type models that are 2-bed, 1-bath. I know this because those might be 2-bed, 1.5 or 2-bath, more for a downsizing family. I was shopping for a new home this year, so I studied the real estate market pretty closely, but they are going for a new home, even just a simple 3-bed, 1.5 or 2-bath in Copper Creek is going to cost you about $450,000. The average home that's built in terms of square footage and everything in Okemos today could be $750,000 in value, like the average square footage home that you'd find in the Okemos zip specifically. I purchased in 13, sold in 22, and my home nearly doubled in value, largely due to the pandemic and supply chain and other factors. But when the cost to build a new home ranges from $400 to $800 due to material cost and labor cost, the existing stock is going to skyrocket, and then you have the success of the schools, right? And so our success of our schools is always going to make single-family home values high. And I was thinking about this problem as it relates to renting and rental products. And one of the fundamental problems with a rental product is that when you buy a home and you have a 20 or 30-year mortgage, at the end of your mortgage, you're paying, the dollars that you're paying have diminished over time, and you're paying a fraction of that value. But when you're renting, your lease, even if you have a 3-year lease, which would be a relatively long lease, they're going to increase your rent back to market. Your mortgage never adjusts to the market, right? At that end of that 20 or 30-year mortgage, you're paying a fraction of the value that you would that day if you if you closed on a new home, right? So it's a difficult problem. But phase 1 and phase 2 and how they connect. So quick overview, zooming out here. This is Hagedorn Road. This is the MSU Community Music School, for those that know it. This is kind of where the trail is going to start. There's a bridge over the Red Cedar River, and then it's going to track on the north side of the river. It's going to wind down here through Dawn Avenue. So this is back where Ellison Brewing Company is. And then it's going to make its way up here. And I'll zoom in here. And we're going to cross this parking lot right here with some zebra striping, and it's going to tie in right here on the southeast quadrant of the intersection from here to have a safe crossing across the railroad tracks, because we now do have to cross the railroad tracks. We're going to use the bridge, so we're going to use the existing pathway system on the south side of Grand River, and then we are going to use that pedestrian island that we talked about here at Campus Hill Drive. You'll cross with the pedestrian island, and then phase 2 will kick in on the north side of Grand River Avenue, and that goes all the way up to Okemos Road, where we'll connect on Okemos Road near the service center and Nancy Moore Park. So the tie-in will be that pedestrian island that goes in, can't remember the exact placement, but it's going to go in that
You
left.
can see it at the bottom there, right below the M43 sign. You can see where they've, to the right, to the right, to the right. No, that's the old one.
Oh, yeah, here's
That's
the new ramp.
Yeah.
So the island's going to go right here, and then there's the landing ramp.
Unless a pathway user wanted to use the crosswalks at Park Lake and Grand River, they could cross south and then north, west and then north and then east again.
Yeah,
And
you'd
they
have
would
to do the
all three of
horseshoe.
those, yeah.
Due to the nature of the intersection and the island and everything here, you'd have to do the horseshoe here, and then you could proceed on the pathway system on the north side, and then you wouldn't have to use that island. So you could use the signalized crosswalks there. So there's multiple ways to make that connection, but we call this phase 1, south of Grand River, from this point right here, all the way back over to Shaw and Hagedorn roughly. We already have the RRFB in here, so this was part of the trail. This was the township's work right here. We did have a motorist hit the RRFB, has since been repaired. I think they hit one of them within a month.
Yeah.
So.
Moths to a flame. I guess the confusion stemmed from some great optimism back in the day when your predecessor seemed to have a magic way of dealing with railroads, and the prospect of that pathway crossing underneath M43 adjacent to the railroad was thought to be a possibility.
I would have to speak with my staff about how those conversations went. Mr. Perry didn't mention that to me at any point, and that never came to the board level at any point. The railroads are very difficult to work with, even when it doesn't really present any discernible liability to them. This would present some discernible liability, right? Any pedestrian crossing. And we have had some accidents on campus. We did have a student that had some earbuds in and walked in front of a train. So I'll double check, but my guess is CN Railroad was the ultimate issue there.
Yeah.
We've struggled just to get right-of-way approval, just to put in, like for the phase 1B where we widened the pathway system proceeding north on Okemos Road, which is part of this MSU to Lake Lansing Trail as well. You'll notice that the pathway still hasn't been widened through that right-of-way. I've since found a contact. We are now in contact with CN, but there's a lot to work through when you're dealing with the railroads. They're very difficult to work with.
Sometimes it's got to just stay informal. I mean, what you see at the north side of Nancy Moore Park is, people sort of, there's that path that goes up through the woods and nobody says anything about it, but it's heavily used. And people just cross the tracks there.
That came up last night.
It should never be, I mean, it's not official.
It's actually an easement for sanitary sewer. And so the trails are there for access in case we have an issue and we need to service that sewer main. That came up last night at the board meeting. And we're gonna look at getting some custom signage because there's several approaches that you could take, that pedestrians could take to try to discourage pedestrians from going back there.
Yeah.
I suspect if I were to put a trail cam up, it's probably gonna be some younger people. But yeah, it's not intended for pedestrians to be using it.
Yeah.
And construction timelines, phase 1. So what we were just talking about here, up to Park Lake and Grand River. Construction has essentially started. It'll start in earnest the first week of January. We had a terribly difficult time bidding this because of the federal funding involved. The bids had to go through MDOT, but it's all bidded. We had our pre-construction meeting last week. We're resolving some guy wire and taking a look at some of the trees that may or may not still be in the path of the trail, but we did do the tree clearing this year. So we anticipate construction will be completed sometime between July and September. So look for a ribbon cutting for that in July or September. And then phase 2, Okemos Road to Campus Hill Apartments here, we hope to go to bid in January or early February. So we're finishing up the engineering on that and we will bid that in-house. That is being funded with township pathway funds and the Ingham County Parks and Trail millage funding. So no federal funding on that one. And then phase 3, which is the last leg, which is exclusively CN Railroad right-of-way, Consumers Energy right-of-way, which they are easy to work with on their right-of-way because they love it when we put these trails in. They use it to access and drive equipment into their right-of-way. We've already started that conversation with them. Easements will not be an issue, but we're looking at least starting the engineering this year. Hopefully, if everything goes well, we could be close to wrapping that engineering up. Well, I should say 2023, not this year, but we hope to start the engineering in 2023, maybe have it wrapped up early in 2024.
The longer you stand there, the more questions I'm going to have for you. So either one or I'll give you one more. You and I had spoken about some of the sections of the climate sustainability plan regarding water, and specifically with regard to our treatment of our sanitary sewer. And I think some folks are aware that our sanitary sewage is treated in a Meridian East Lansing Meridian Water Resource Recovery Facility down on Trowbridge. And that facility was recently upgraded. And I think there's interest I've heard in maybe seeing a little bit more about how the anaerobic digester at the Water Resource Recovery Facility is operating. I don't know if folks here would be interested in hearing more about that.
I'd rather go on a tour.
That's what they have. So I will send Leroy and Commissioner McConnell the 2 contacts for scheduling a tour. All you need to do is send them a quick email. But if you wanted to coordinate and do a team tour, you could. It's a little smelly, so if for those that have sensitive nostrils, just be forewarned. But the digester is a very cool project because it's essentially cut the waste byproduct. So at the end of all of that wastewater recovery, we do have some byproduct that would traditionally go into a landfill. We used to fill up, I forget if they're 15 or 20 yard dumpsters, but I think they're 15 yard dumpsters, and we'd fill 7 or 8 in a day. Now we fill 1. Wow. So that's the impact of the digester. The early forecasts, which were conservative, we were hoping to cut the waste byproduct down by, I think, like 40%, or maybe it was 60%. It was one of those, it was a 60-40 proposition. So it's obviously far exceeded those conservative estimates. And that waste byproduct does go into a Granger landfill. So that's the end destination for that solid waste at the end of it.
Is the biogas from the digester significantly impacting the energy usage?
I do not believe so. I do not believe so, but that didn't get covered specifically when I toured the facility with my counterpart in East Lansing recently. So I'd have to get back to you on that.
I mean, so MSU's digester, which admittedly is much more food, so it's making richer gas, that they power a dorm. I mean, it's a pretty big output considering. So I was just curious, yeah, what they're generating there.
And construction is ongoing right now, so if you take a tour, it is kind of fun. You get to see, you know, kind of mid-construction, some of what's going on in some of the bays, and the 4 bays, and the work that they're doing.
That'd be great.
Some were emptied when we were there, so you can actually see the bubblers down at the bottom.
All right, well, thank you so much for coming and joining us this evening. Always great to hear all these latest, greatest updates.
Absolutely, thank you for having me.
Anything else anybody would like to bring before the commission this evening? Other than, yes, please.
I could make an announcement about Earth Club.
Thank you, please.
So we recently had a vegan meeting with the Director of Nutrition and Food Service about the new vegan options in the cafeteria. So within the next couple of months, we'll have more vegan options to be able to include everyone in like the food plan at our cafeteria. And then we also had a podcast with Leroy, which is still in the works of being edited, but that will come out and I'll get the link out so the community can see it and listen to it.
Super.
And yeah, those are our 2 biggest updates.
Great. Lewis, anything to share with the?
Yeah, I'm sad to say, but the May 3rd, 2023 is going to be my last meeting here. I'm going up to Alaska. I got a fishing charter job up there for the summer, and I'm really excited about that. But we get out.
You know what's called deadliest catch,
Yes,
right?
yeah. So I'll be fishing for salmon, halibut, and rockfish. It'll be real fun. But I'm real excited. It's a once in a lifetime kind of thing. But you know, it's kind of bittersweet. You know, I get to go live my dreams, but I got to leave you guys. But I'll miss you guys a bunch. But I'll be here up until that May 3rd, 2023. So we got a few more months.
Congrats.
Thank you.
So that's just summer, or that's?
Yeah, that's just going to be our summer, and then hopefully going to Michigan Tech. So
That's great.
Meridian's passing me on.
Onwards and upwards.
Yeah.
Unless I hear another motion in the next 30 seconds. Without objection, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.